We have to deal with the 11 million individuals who are here illegally. Now, we all agree that these men and women should have to earn their way to citizenship. But for comprehensive immigration reform to work, it must be clear from the outset that there is a pathway to citizenship. It's easy sometimes for the discussion to take on a feeling of us versus them. And when that happens, a lot of folks forget that most of us used to be them. We forget that. The foundation for bipartisan action is already in place. And if Congress is unable to move forward in a timely fashion, I will send up a bill based on my proposal and insist that they vote on it right away.
Lorella, I'd like to begin with you. You were at the presentation, the speech by President Obama, and you were tweeting during his speech. Could you talk about some of your tweets?
Sure. I mean, I think through my tweets, I was expressing mixed emotions. I was expressing tremendous amount of excitement to hear the president, just a week after his inauguration, come out and talk about wanting to reform immigration and to have a clear pathway to citizenship for our community. At the same time, you as an advocate and an activist, you understand what's happening in your community right now, and you understand that you can't really wait for the legislative timeline to move because there's a real sense of urgency now. So it was an expression of both happiness, disappointment, and knowing the truth, knowing that while the president is speaking, people are being deported and ripped apart from their families and their communities. But again, very privileged to have been there and excited for this year.
And May, one of the things that interested me was the president didn't just give a speech about policy. He also tried to remind people about the history of immigration battles in the United States. When he said that remark, most of us used to be them. And you've looked extensively at the immigration history of the country. And one of the points that you've raised that most people have overlooked is this whole issue of the defining of who is legal and illegal and how that has been used to target specific populations.
Right. Well, I think in a way that was the best part of the president's speech when he spoke to the values of what it means to be a nation of immigrants. And as he pointed out, most of us used to be them. And he also said that this country was built by the hard work of immigrants. I'm reminded a lot of the difference between immigration at the turn of the last century and immigration at the turn of this century. In many ways, they're similar. It's a mass migration. It's a labor migration. It contributed to a dynamic growth of the country's economy and culture. The main difference, though, was 100 years ago, there were no numerical restrictions. So when people say, my ancestors came legally, they didn't break the law, they didn't cut to the front of the line. Well, there wasn't any line. 98% of the people who showed up at Ellis Island got in, and that's a big difference.
And you specifically target the visa situation because the way that the numerical quotas work right now, those countries that normally supply a lot of immigrants are automatically hit their visa limits very quickly.
That's
and
right.
then everyone else ends up being illegal, whereas other countries it's very easy to get in.
Right. I think that's the big elephant in the room that none of the plans on the table in the Senate or in the White House actually have taken up. And that elephant is the visa system. Right now, no country can have more than 7% of the total. And that 7%, that maximum for every country, is about 25,000. So 4 countries every year max out. And you can guess which 4 countries they are: Mexico, India, China, and the Philippines. So the wait, when people say get at the end of the line, that line can be 20 years. It could actually be 40 years long. So it's a cruel joke.
In the case of Mexicans, it's closer to 40 years long, right?
Yeah. So there's, to tell someone get to the end of the line is really, I think it's a cruel joke.
Talk about workers, the situation for workers, and the studies that have been done around them in Virginia, in North Carolina.
Well, immigrants today work in all kinds of jobs. They don't only work in agriculture anymore. They work in cities, in our restaurants and hotels and buildings, but they also work in the food processing industry. And the poultry industry really relies on undocumented labor. There was a case in South Carolina where an ICE raid ended up in the deportation of all the workers, and the company resorted to prison labor to replace them. These are the kinds of jobs that businesses have on offer today. So I think part of the problem also
They
is
couldn't get local residents to take the jobs.
not right away. I mean, they actually ended up having to raise wages to attract local African Americans to work there. So part of our problem is also the fact that business wants undocumented labor, right? Because the undocumented worker also has fewer opportunities to complain, because if you complain, you can get deported.
Fernando Garcia, you're with the Border Network for Human Rights, and clearly one of the big issues, and actually some of the differences between the Senate proposal and President Obama's presentation, and the devil in this is going to be in the details of how what is actually decided in Congress. But the Senate version would require the certification that the border is secure before anybody could pass from being temporarily in the United States to being able to apply for permanent residency. But I've been struck by the enormous expenditures already that the government is spending. As I noted in my column in the Daily News this week, the federal government spent $18 billion last year on border security, which is more than the combined budgets of the FBI, the Marshal Service, the Secret Service, the DEA, the ATF, all of these other federal law enforcement agencies. Their total budgets were only $14 billion. So we're already spending a huge amount on border security. Your sense, where the president is saying, on the other hand, that he doesn't want to have this kind of certification, that he's already secured or done a lot to secure the borders in his first term.
Yes. Let's just remember that we had already done Bob and John of most of the border enforcement benchmark that we discussed in 2006, which was the previous effort on immigration reform. At the border, we have seen a build-up on enforcement. I mean, if we remember now today that we have 400 miles of fencing and walls already in place, we have doubled the Border Patrol agents on the ground to up to 22,000. We had deployed the National Guard, military units at the border. And as you say, we have spent billions of dollars. So I think it seems that never is going to be enough for some people. I mean, it seems that border enforcement will always be a political tool, to advance, either to oppose citizenship or access to citizenship, or not to essentially destroy the process on comprehensive immigration reform. So we believe that is going to be unworkable. I mean, who knows who's going to certify this process? Governor Perry, that actually had been saying that there were bombs exploding in El Paso, or Governor Brewer, that actually she presented the chaos and beheadings in Tucson or in the border would never happen. So I think it is really concerning that they are linking more punitive policies, more criminalization for immigrants, more deportation and militarization to access citizenship.
On the issue of militarization of the border, Fernando Garcia, the issue, for example, of drones, talk about what's happening.
Well, we already have deployed some drones, and I think it just only shows, the level of militarization. But now with this new proposal, they want to deploy a series, increase the number of drones, and have all of these unmanned flying vehicles along the U.S.-Mexico border. And again, each of those drones are going to be extremely expensive. Obviously, they would not be engaging with communities directly, but it's a show of how we're moving towards a full militarization of the border.